Some monsters aren't born. They aren't raised in broken homes. They aren't shaped by violence alone. They aren't forged by madness. They are created by exclusion, by silence, by rejection that comes without explanation, by systems that never tell you what you did wrong, only that you are no longer welcome. This world doesn't punish people loudly anymore. It removes them quietly. It locks doors politely. It rewrites stories subtly. And then it watches what happens to the ones left outside. Authority doesn't need evidence. It doesn't need fairness. It only needs permission. And once it grants itself that permission, society follows like gravity. Because most people don't want truth. They want safety. And safety, in modern society, means agreeing with whoever holds the microphone. Once those in power decide they don't like you, your name becomes heavier in conversations. Your intentions become suspicious. Your silence becomes interpreted. Your presence becomes uncomfortable. And suddenly, without trial, without crime, without warning, you are no longer one of them. Not condemned, just excluded. And people pretend that it isn't a form of violence. Every society needs a scapegoat. Someone to blame when things feel wrong. Someone to absorb the anger of people who can't confront the real source of their frustration. And it's rarely the chaotic ones. Rarely the destructive ones. Rarely the loud ones. It's the quiet, stable man. The one who doesn't perform pain. The one who doesn't beg for validation. The one who doesn't shout allegiance to the tribe. Because stability that cannot be owned is threatening. Silence that cannot be scripted is dangerous. And independence that cannot be branded is unforgivable. So they project. They call you cold, arrogant, disconnected, toxic. They call you whatever makes them feel justified. Because it's easier to hate someone than to understand them. You are hated by people who refuse to see the good in anyone. Because seeing good would mean admitting they've been wrong about the world. And modern slavery isn't about chains anymore. It's about conformity. It's about learning which opinions are allowed, which emotions are acceptable, which truths must be softened, which questions must never be asked. It's about bending the knee and calling it maturity. It's about sacrificing integrity and calling it growth. It's about surviving inside a story you didn't write. And the moment you step outside that story, the moment you stop repeating the narrative, the moment you stop performing obedience, you become a problem. Not because you are violent, but because you are uncontrollable. Systems don't fear anger. They fear refusal. They fear people who no longer need applause. They fear people who no longer fear isolation. They fear people who no longer ask permission to exit. Once you are labelled a problem, something changes in people. Support becomes dangerous. Kindness becomes risky. Loyalty becomes inconvenient. People still fear for you, but only in private. They still understand you, but only in whispers. Because systems don't operate on compassion. They operate on compliance. And compliance teaches people to abandon each other slowly, one silent decision at a time. Nobody wants to help you if helping you could cost them comfort. Nobody wants to defend you if defending you could make them visible. Nobody wants to stand beside you if standing beside you could make them next. So they watch, and you learn what loneliness really is. Not being alone, but being seen and ignored. And the ones who complain about these systems the loudest, they usually suffer the worst. Because power doesn't fear criticism. It fears independence. Criticism can be mocked. Independence cannot be controlled. So I separated myself from the tribe. Not because I thought I was better, not because I thought I was special, but because I realized the tribe did not love individuals. It loved obedience. I stopped begging for belonging. I became an observer. I watched how people changed their morals based on audience. I watched how compassion disappeared when it was inconvenient. I watched how courage only existed when it was rewarded. I watched how truth bent to protect comfort. And the more I observed, the more I understood why they hated me. Because I was no longer participating in the illusion. Because I was no longer reacting the way I was supposed to. Because I was no longer emotionally owned by the system. And that terrifies people more than rebellion ever could. Because rebellion still belongs to the system. Independence does not. Once you have options, once you've been excluded, once you no longer benefit from pretending, they don't want to rehabilitate you. They don't want to understand you. They don't want to punish you. They want you erased. Not violently, quietly. Through neglect. Through indifference. Through social disappearance. They don't want to pay for you to live freely. They want you to stop reminding them that freedom exists. Because your survival, without their approval, exposes the lie. And that is the real crime. This is how monsters are created. Not through hatred, but through abandonment. Through isolation. Through a society that teaches people that belonging matters more than integrity. And obedience matters more than truth. And when people finally break, the system doesn't ask what it did to them. It only asks how to label them. So if you feel alienated, if you feel unseen, if you feel tolerated but never accepted, understand this. You are not broken. You are not defective. You are not the problem. You are simply awake in a world that survives by keeping people asleep. And the most dangerous thing you can be in a system built on compliance is someone who no longer needs its permission.